Good morning, this is Hazel Jarvis and this is Artonline. Today, to celebrate October, we're going to do a wreath of autumn leaves. So the first thing to do is to draw a circle, and I use a plate for that. And then I just lightly sketch out by drawing in the stems and the rough shape of where each leaf is going to be. Once I have a very rough design, then I start to draw in a little bit more detail. So for my maple leaf, I put a line in that suggests the stem and the main vein, and then I'm going to put in these two side veins, very pale, and just two more down here, and I'm just going to draw in very lightly around the edge. And if you're worried about your drawing, you can always just hold your leaf down and draw around it. And I tried, if I possibly can, to choose leaves and twigs that have a little bit of motion in them. And I always make sure that my main rib has a bit of bounce to it. It's never just a straight line. So I've lightly drawn in most of my design. So redundant as this seems, once I've got most of the design in, I now take my eraser and I lighten my pencil line and I erase my basic circle line. So although this red maple leaf at the top might seem like the obvious choice, I actually prefer to begin with something small and less important, just to kind of warm myself up. So for that reason, I'm going to start with these nice yellow cherry leaves. And I'm going to begin with my yellow, number 43. I'm going to put some yellow in at the top, like this, and then I'm going to add clean water and I'm going to drag that yellow down. And then I'll put a tiny bit more yellow in at the tip and at the base of the leaf. These leaves are now very wet, so we wait before we tackle this one. So now we're going to do these lovely yellowy berries over here, and I'm going to take my pencil line, my eraser again, and I'm just going to lighten that pencil line. So since we're following the colour wheel concept, I'm going to make these a lighter lemonier yellow. So I'm going to use my yellow number 40. So I put a little bit of this lovely yellow in, and then I go back to my green and I just tuck in a little bit of green into the berries. And in some of the berries, I'm going to put a little bit of my brown, my burnt sienna into, because they look a little bit weathered. And I'm going to take this same colour that I have on my brush, and I'm going to hold my brush almost vertically and just tease out the wet paint to get the stem of the berry. Like so. Now I'm going to move on to this spray of leaves, which I found lying on the ground. They're a little bit dry, but I think we can work with them. And they have both yellow and green, so there'll be a nice transition from the yellow into the green. And once again, I'm just going to lighten my pencil line, and this is a common refrain, but I'll try and make this the last time I say this in this video. For my leaves, I'm going to use a combination of 53, the green, and 40, the lemon yellow. And I'm just going to stroke in some leaves as if they're lemony yellow, and some as if they're green, and some as if they're a bit of both. So now I'm just adding more leaves. And just varying that mix of yellow and green just a little bit. These leaves, as you can see, grow roughly in alternate pairs, but some have already fallen off because the specimen is so dry. So I'm going to take a little bit of poetic license and not put them in as pairs. There'll be a couple that read as pairs, but not all. And in some, where I've got just a pale yellow underlay, I'm going to put another layer just of half green down one side. And I take my number 2 brush, and holding it almost vertical, I just lightly draw in the stems too. We now come to that most pernicious of plant, the porcelain berry vine. I'm going to start, just so I know where I'm going, by putting in the stems. So using that number 2 brush, and I'm mixing a little bit of my alizarin crimson, which is number 36, in with my green. So in keeping with the colour wheel idea, I'm going to use a slightly bluer green for the leaves of the porcelain berry vine. So we go from the yellow green to a blue green. I'm going to use number 58 for this, which is a very strong colour, but I'll probably cut a little bit in with the alizarin crimson or with the yellow ochre. So I paint in a little bit at the base. And now I'm going to take my fine brush, I'm going to put clean water on, and I'm going to pull that green out toward the edge of the leaf. While that leaf is still wet, I go back to my green, 58, and I put in a little bit of the darker green at the tips too, so that my leaf seems to be three-dimensional and it moves in space. And the wet paper is going to allow the paint to move. And I also want to tone that green down very slightly, so I'm going to take a dab of 36 alizarin crimson and just put a little bit of that in. And one more leaf, and into this leaf, to make it just a little bit different, I've added a tiny bit of indigo and a little bit more of the alizarin crimson. So I go nice and dark at the base. And now we come to the real reason why we include this beastly plant, and that's because of the berries, because it's so hard to find something blue in the fall for our autumnal wreath. So we go with these berries, which can vary in colour. They can be pale turquoise, they can be a beautiful blue, they can be a dark purple. So we're going to put some of all those colours in. We'll start with some wonderful turquoise. And then into this turquoise, we'll mix a little bit of our blue, number 64. So we'll have some blueberries. And finally, we'll put in some purple, so we have some blue purple. From blue purple, we're going to segue into these dark purple, or dark purple brown rather, which are the seed pods of the false baptisia. So I'm just going to go ahead and load up my brush with a little bit of 38, and I'm going to put in a little bit of 47, the brown, and a little bit of the maroon colour, or the burgundy colour, number 37. So we go from a blue purple to a redder purple. So we're now going to continue with our transition to red with our Virginia creeper over here. Before the Virginia creeper totally dried up, it was a rather beautiful sort of pinky red. So that's the colour that I'm going to paint it as. Seems a little pink. You can always just put in a touch of green. You don't want to make it too brown, but it's certainly more in keeping with what the actual leaf looks like. I have a little bit of a gap here, so I am going to add a very small maple leaf behind my red maple leaf. So I'm just going to improvise on the colour a little bit, all the way. And now we come to our traditional large maple leaf. So even though it's red, I'm going to start with a little bit of a yellow undercoat on it, and I'm going to bleed some bright red into it. So I start with my 43 yellow, and I just do a pretty strong wash. I put a blob of the yellow on. I'm just going to introduce some clean water. And now into here I'm going to introduce my pure red, my number 30. And I'm just going to let the water do most of the hard work for me. For our orange, we're going to do these wonderful Chinese lanterns that I love so much. So that is number 33, the orange, and maybe a touch of 31. So our wreath looks like this, and all that really remains to be done is to add some veins and to put in the connecting branches and twigs and stems between our different items. So if you see somewhere where you think you've got a little bit of an empty space, like here for example, you can always pop in another berry, or you can extend your vine, your porcelain berry vine, and put in a tendril, just like that. So your beautiful wreath is now finished. So I really hope you'll go outside, start hunting for leaves and other treasures, and I can't wait to see what you do. I really hope you've enjoyed this project, and I can't wait to see what you do.